as a public holiday. Also, the federal government has cancelled special effects sessions scheduled for Tuesday, as the former president, Muhammadu Buhari, will be buried same day. In honor of the late former president, Muhammadu Buhari, who passed away on Sunday. Tonight, we pause to reflect on the life and times of a man many say shaped Nigeria's modern political history. Muhammadu Buhari, former president, former head of state, and a symbol of discipline and national unity. To help us look back at his legacy, from his leadership ideals to his vision for Nigeria, we're joined by someone who worked closely with him in government, the former Minister of Communications, Barrister Adebayo Shittu. He served in President Buhari's cabinet and had a front row seat to history in the making. We'll be speaking with him tonight about the man behind the presidency and the mark he leaves on this nation. Good evening to you, Mr. Shittu. Thank you very much for joining us on Politics Tonight.
Pleasure being with you.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's a solemn period for the nation, 24 hours after former President Buhari passed away. The nation is still grappling with this huge loss. African leaders have also sent him their condolences that former President Buhari spread his tentacles beyond Nigeria. But as someone who worked closely with him, who was President Buhari, and what would you say defined his leadership style?
Well, Buhari, may his soul rest in peace, was one very simple Nigerian. Despite his antecedents as a military general and as a former president, he lived the life of a pure power. He was, one person who was perhaps the most incorruptible political leader we ever have in this country. He lived a very frugal life. He never imagined that he would ever take what he didn't believe belonged to him. He lived a frugal life, like I said, and he was really a patriot to the core. He believed in Nigeria, and he believed in the national interest also, to be over and above personal interests. And he lived all, throughout in that mold of a quintessential talaka, poor person who would not go over to engage in aggrandizement. But that was not to say that he had control over other people who took advantage of his gentility and unobtrusiveness to commit all sorts of, horrible things against the Commonwealth of Nigeria.
And of course, we'll come back to why it was easy for people to take his gentility for granted, just as you've put it. Because going back to his early days as a military officer, to becoming head of state in 1983, and then returning decades later through the ballot box as a democratically elected president in 2015. And since then, I've heard people say President Buhari's life was shaped by purpose and marked by perseverance. 7 days of national mourning, Tuesday, July 15, has been declared public holiday. How deserving is this, Mr. Shittu?
Well, the truth is, Buhari lived his life a Muslim. And I'm sure he would not have wished that, a 7-day holiday be introduced to purportedly honor him in death. Of course, he deserves it if you look at it from the perspective of, the generality of people. But for him, for instance, in Islam, there's nothing like state burial. The man will be buried by 2 p.m. tomorrow by the grace of God, and I can assure everyone that I will be part of it. I'm already, on the way to Daura to be part of it. All that he needs now, more than any other thing, is prayers. Prayers for God to forgive whatever shortcomings he had, and prayer for God to forgive his sins, and prayer for him to be granted a Jannah Firdaus in the hereafter. He has done his bit in this country and for this country, and I am sure he would have died a very satisfied person, ready to go and give an account of his stewardship here on earth to his creator.
But I would like you to share a personal moment or interaction with President Buhari that left a lasting impression on you? As someone who was in his cabinet, how did he influence your work as Minister of Communications?
The truth, or the bitter truth about Buhari, is the fact that he was unobtrusive, like I said. He's one person who minds his business. If you work with Buhari, even if you don't see him in 3 months' time, he will not ask of you. And when eventually you see him, he will not complain that you have not asked after him. He's that kind of person. He's a man of himself. He's one person who does not believe that people have to kowtow or pander to his wishes or, engage in hypocrisy or, praise worship. He doesn't want anybody to worship him. He sees himself as a very simple person, and he lived a very simple life. Not engaging in ostentatious living.
All right.
And not going beyond his means in whatever he was doing. In fact, I suspected that in the 4 years I worked with him, he hardly bought any new clothes or new shoes. It was that simple.
And that sounds very interesting. But Mr. Shittu, let's take a break. And very much for staying with us. I mean, it's very important for us to have a clear conversation with Mr. Shittu. Tonight, it's about the life and times of former President Muhammadu Buhari, his legacy, leadership style, and vision for Nigeria. I guess tonight, Adebayo Shittu, former Minister of Communications, is one man to have that conversation with. Thank you so much for staying with us on the program, Mr. Shittu. So before we went on that break, you were talking to me about how thoughtful it was for President Buhari to always mind his business. You say he does not want anyone to worship him. He does not pander to the wishes of the people. For a man like that, did you ever disagree with him on a policy issue? And I ask because, I remember your time as Honorable Minister, there were few controversies, questions arose about who really controlled ICT strategy, the minister, NCC, or the presidency. There were conflicts between ICT innovation players and the bureaucratic civil service-driven pace of the ministry. There were also efforts to onboard NIPOST into more commercially viable entities, and you had a lot to push for. Was there any time both of you had to disagree on a policy issue?
Well, it's a pity that, all of that has become past tense. I did in the number of issues. I wanted to unburden the NIPOST. I wanted to turn NIPOST into 6 different companies. It was not to be. I also, for instance, wanted to establish an ICT university for Nigeria. Again, some people within the system who perhaps expected me to come and beg them and lobby them, as it were, lobby, quote and unquote. Whenever they don't succeed in getting you to do their bidding, I suspect they go to Mr. President to mislead him and all of that. To the extent that I was once commended at, a Federal Executive Council meeting for having worked very hard on an ICT university memo. But at the end of the day, after the commendation, I was told that that was an overambitious, project, and so it had to be stepped down. I mean, these were some of the frustrations some of, got, in the government. So we just had to leave it, until when God gives us the opportunity of doing some of these things as a private enterprises. Then Nigeria, from that point, Nigeria will be able to benefit. For instance, the NIPOST project. The funny thing, after my failure to get the NIPOST thing, decentralized and create with 60 the new companies being established. Even when the Tinubu regime came on board and the new Minister of ICT was appointed, I made effort to reach out to him, to introduce him to those great ideas, but the man simply refused to see me. He was not interested. to even know what I wanted to discuss with him. Out of frustration, I had to forget about it. I hope one of these days we will have, a minister who will be disposed to listening to ideas from, predecessors, so that Nigeria and the good value can be added to Nigeria.
All right then, but the President Tinubu, I do apologize, President Buhari ever confide in his cabinet about the weight or burden of leading a complex nation like Nigeria? I wonder what he said to you or any of the cabinet members. I mean, even when criticized for being too slow or detached, many say he remained on course. What did you think kept him going in the face of such persistent public pressure?
What did I?
Did you get that question, Mr. Shittu?
I didn't get the question.
Right. So I wanted to know if at any time did President Buhari confide in his cabinet about the weight or burden of leading a complex nation like Nigeria? What did he say? And also, when he was criticized for being too slow or detached, many say he remained on course. What did you think kept him going in the face of such public pressure?
Perhaps he would have been having people goading him on to continue the way he was moving. But it was issues like that were never discussed at an executive council meeting.
And also, there are some critics who had argued that President Buhari should have, retired quietly after his first attempt failed in 2003, yet it persisted in 2015. What do you think that says about
it?
What do you think that says?
It was a constitutional issue.
Please go ahead.
It was a constitutional issue. He still had his life to live, and he had not gotten to a stage where he could not move his limbs and all of that. And he simply, wished to continue. And he got the support of our party to continue in office. So that was, I think, was a more critical issue.
Okay. Well, let's talk about his popularity. Right. So what made him, such a beloved figure in the northern region?
I think his simplicity of life, and the fact that he mixed very freely with everybody, and everybody was welcome in his home or in his presence. Everybody was welcome.
I specifically asked that question because, a lot of Nigerians continue to wonder how President Buhari managed to maintain his political base in the north, even during times of economic hardship and insecurity. For some, they say it was about religion. Some say it was about regional identity. How would you describe it? Did you get that, Mr. Shittu?
And who? Beg your pardon.
A lot of Nigerians continue to wonder how President Buhari managed to maintain his political base in the north, even during times of economic hardship and insecurity. And for some, they say it's about how religious he was. Some say it could be about regional identity. So I was asking, how would you describe it? Would you say a sense of shared struggle contributed more to his popularity in the north?
It was not only in the north that Buhari was very popular, even among large swaths of people in Yoruba land, in particular the Muslim population. They loved him. They saw him as a serious-minded Muslim who left everything for God, who was not a kleptomaniac, who would pray the way an ordinary Muslim should pray, and who was not given to ostentatious living. I think those were some of the selling points of Buhari.
So do you think any other Nigerian politician today enjoys the kind of emotional connection he had with his people?
As of today, I cannot think of anybody. As of today, I cannot think of anybody in that mode.
All right.
Because, of course, nobody is like him.
I want us to talk about politics. Why do you think President Buhari was so, aggressively demarcated by his opponents, especially with labels like religious bigots? As someone who worked closely with him, did you ever see any evidence of religious bias in Buhari's decisions? Can you hold on, Mr. Shittu? In Buhari's decisions or leadership style? And I ask because I'm sure you're also aware of criticisms that his appointments and policy choices favored a particular religion or region. How do you respond to that perception?
I recall that when we were appointed in 2015, there were 36 ministers, 18 Muslims, 18 Christians. So there was no parochial consideration at all. It was an equitable distribution of appointees from Muslims and Christians. So nobody can criticize him for, religious bias. The truth is that in this country, for a lot of elites, once you don't engage in all the atrocities they commit in terms of womanizing, in terms of, alcohol, engaging in terms of stealing and all of that, you are considered as an enemy. Mm. That is the truth of it. So for somebody who wants to have a leader like Buhari, who restricted himself in regard to all acts of indiscipline, all acts of stealing, all acts of lawlessness and lewdness and all of that, he would be seen as an extraordinary person who does not align with what the majority of elites engage in. Yeah. So I want to believe that for anybody who will call him who will call him who will call him somebody who is not fit to, to move with, it is because he is superior to them in several wonderful qualities of discipline, of incorruptibility, and so on. Yeah. The tendency is for people to love those who behave like them. And you know very well that in this country, a lot of very good Muslims are perhaps illiterates. So when they see somebody who behave like them in the area of religiosity, of course they adore such people. Mm-hmm.
Right. So Mr. Shittu, if I got you correctly, what you've just insinuated is that the image of President Buhari as a religious extremist was deliberately manufactured for political gain.
There was nothing to justify other than the fact that he was a disciplined and a very loyal religious person, fearful of God and living within means, within godly means. Other than that, what was he doing? Did he ever engage in, making trouble with non-Muslims? Or did he engage in things that are despicable with regard to lawlessness and antisocial behavior? Nothing of such. Mm.
So if that is the situation, or was the situation, what then would you consider as the consequences of this branding on his ability to govern or unite Nigerians across religious lines?
That is different from his ability to govern. Merely being there at the helm of affairs and not doing those things that the ordinary man or the ordinary elite will do was enough to incur the displeasure of this elite.
Right. But, still on this, you're a devout Muslim yourself, but I know you work with Christians and people of other faiths under President Buhari. How inclusive was that administration in practice? How inclusive was it?
I've told you how many Muslims and how many Christians he appointed. He never discriminated. Even I, as an individual, I have 12 cousins who are Christians. And I've kept supporting them all my life. I am also a product of the Baptist High School in Shaki, where I was trained, where I finished my school certificate. I don't discriminate. And yet people are still so intolerant that you have a different kind of life to live, that you live that is not in consonance with their own law, lawlessness.
Was it ever...
So it's a natural thing. People...
And I'm also wondering, was he ever personally troubled or frustrated by that label? How did he respond behind closed doors?
No, he doesn't. Nobody will come and confront him.
Wow.
Nobody will come and confront him. They just, do all sorts of reckless talking behind his back. He will just feel amused at all such reckless talks, and he goes his own way.
Right.
That was his life.
All right. Mr. Shittu, let's look at his legacy and achievements. I mean, you worked closely with him for 4 years. What, in your view, President Buhari's most underappreciated achievements in office?
The greatest achievement is the type of humble life that he lived, even in the face of having conquered the world as a president. He hardly, he was not given to changing his, into new dresses all the time, or buying beautiful shoes and all of that. He lived a very humble life. He lived within his means. And he went his way without making trouble for anybody. And the truth also was he was indeed very, very patriotic. He loved this country so much. And he also feared God, and he lived within his means. So for people who get into public offices now and make it their choice to just see Nigeria blind, they have an example to learn from him.
Mr. Shittu, you just said he loved this country so much, but when you hear his critics say his administration failed to unify the country, what do you say to them?
I don't know what they meant by that he failed to unify. What exactly did he do wrong in the area of unification of Nigeria? What did he do wrong? Was he partial in distribution of the perquisites of office? I mean, if you actually look at the population of this country, I am not sure that it is about 50-50 in terms of Muslims and Christians. But he ensured that all sides benefited equally. So I don't know what else they expected him to have done in the area of uniting Nigeria.
Right. And I also read former Vice President Oshibajo's tribute. It says Nigeria has lost a true patriot, a man whose life was marked by unyielding devotion to the nation he loved. It says President Buhari's legacy will endure as a testament to the nobility of public service defined by honesty, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to the public good. How would you describe his core leadership ideals? What principle, apart from humility, guided his decisions most?
To do the best for this country, to the best of his ability. Those were the principles. And if you look, for instance, when he came on board as president, recall that Lagos-Ibadan Expressway had gone very bad, was in a state of dilapidation. He made sure that 100 plus kilometers was given a facelift, and today all Nigerians are enjoying the benefit of that road, which was, which was done by his government. There were a number of other similar roads he did all over the country. There were also a lot of railway lines, new railway lines, the Lagos-Ibadan railway line, the Kaduna Abuja, Red Villa. These were all his handiworks. He did them for Nigeria. Until tomorrow, we are enjoying the benefits of. He has several other projects in the pipeline which time or resources could not allow him to continue to complete. Yeah. So,
and for many Nigerians who say President Muhammadu Buhari led a life full enough for many men, they say he will be remembered best by his own words. I belong to everybody and I belong to nobody. A statement many Nigerians will not forget in a hurry.
That is a signal of impartiality. And being kind to all kinds and manners of people, no matter from which part of the country.
And also still about private moments, Mr. Shittu. You know, in private meetings or, let's say, cabinet sessions, what values did he emphasize most to you who served as his ministers and aides? Would you say he led more by... So would you say he led more by example or by instruction? And how did that shape the tone of the administration?
He allowed freedom for every minister to distinguish himself in the area of his core responsibility.
And he had a brilliant career in the military. General Officer Commanding 4th Infantry Division, 1980 to 1981. Yeah. General Officer Commanding 2nd Mechanized Infantry, General 1981 to 1981 October. And also General Officer Commanding 3rd Armed Division, 1981 to 1983. But what role did his military background play in shaping his focus, unshakable focus now?
The role of ensuring that he remains disciplined. He remained a disciplined officer. He was not given to lousiness or exuberance and all of that. He
Mr. Shittu, are you there?
Remain a very disciplined. So discipline is a hallmark.
So how would you then compare his perseverance with that of other Nigerian leaders you've worked with or observed?
He exhibited it to the highest. Licentiousness was not part of his making. He was very highly disciplined. Highly disciplined.
And for someone who said, I came to this world with nothing and I'll go back with nothing, why should I steal? These were some of the words of former President Buhari. What does it say about political leaders? Mr. Shittu, what does it say about political leaders who equate being in political office or public office?
A lot of our leaders, because of their irreligiousness, would go overboard to steal Nigeria blind. He was not that kind of person. He was not cut out for that. And it is for everybody who can read about his life. I am sure that a lot more writers will be coming up as from this period, and people will be able to really be reminded that here was a leader who was a president, and he lived a very frugal life. He lived a very disciplined life, and he was not given to, all kinds of lawlessness or excesses in dressing or in eating.
So what would you say, what lessons do you think public office holders or elected office holders should take away from this? Leaders who equate being in political office to an opportunity to amass wealth.
The lesson that should be taken by all is the fact that everybody will die. Everybody has an expiry date during which he will die. And when you die, you don't take anything to the other world. And so to that extent, what even the Bible says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his life? At the end of the day, every one of us will lose our lives. So what's the point of stealing, and bastardizing, the Commonwealth, our Commonwealth, just because of your own selfish interests? When at the end of the day, you lose your life, and you won't, everything you've stolen will not be of benefit to you. At the end of the day, you are going to account to the Almighty Creator.
So what would you say Nigerians will remember President Buhari most for? And if President Buhari if he had one major regret, what do you think it would be?
Well, I don't know. He's a human being like any other person. And to me, I think that if he would have a regret, it would be that Nigerians should live to reform themselves and live better lives. Not reform as to what he ought to have done that he didn't do. I don't see anything that he ought to have done that he did, other than for Nigerians to see that if a president can die despite everything, and despite not having, acquired illegalities, they too would die at a point in time, and they would be accountable to God.
Quite instructive. And as someone who worked with him, Mr. Shittu, what personal lesson did you take away from his leadership that has stayed with you?
I have been following him in the area of discipline and incorruptibility. That's one great thing I learned from him. Of course, I have also acquired those from my religious training. So I only get reminded that there's an individual, an elderly person who has been living up to the Quranic teachings.
All right.
So I've not lost anything in terms of knowledge and in terms of the lessons to be learned.
All right, then.
He exemplifies the Quranic lessons that we are taught about greed, about lawlessness, about corruption, and all of it.
All right. That's where we'll leave this conversation tonight. I mean, the nation is still mourning. Love him or criticize him, former President Muhammadu Buhari shaped a chapter in Nigeria's history marked by discipline, resilience, and deep conviction. This is indeed a national loss, and we pray that his soul rest in perfect peace. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Mr. Adebayo Shittu, former Minister of Communications. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you very much for watching.